We're back. You are listening to TurboCharge Your Business on the number one global business talk and news network on the internet, IBGR, International Business Growth Radio. I'm Patty Lawrence, and this is episode 50. It's a cycle. Monitor. Be sure to go to our website at ibgr.network and download the show notes. So, in the last segment, we talked about what it is. What is the cycle? The cycle is for the financial management of your company. And what it is if you look at the face of a clock, it's similar to that. And you go in a clockwise direction. At 12 o'clock is measure. That's what we just talked about. This time we're going to the next the next step in that phase, in that cycle, is monitor. So we have measure and then we monitor. So why do we monitor? And what do we monitor? Well, monitor, just by definition, is really is pretty basic. It's paying attention regularly. Okay. And what we're going to be paying attention to is what we're measuring, right? Because we're defining that what we're measuring matters because we're going to manage it. Okay. So we have to monitor it as well. Because what good is measuring if you're not going to pay attention to it, right? I've seen that. I've seen that in so many companies. We have a ton of numbers that we're calculating and a ton of metrics that we're calculating, and they go nowhere. People don't pay attention to them. So what does that say to your organization, to your team, if you're measuring, right? You're doing all of these calculations, you're pulling all these numbers, you're putting them on a dashboard, but everybody just walks right past it. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Well, if you're not putting any effort into it, don't expect your team to be putting any effort into, because you're setting the example. You're setting the tone from the top. Okay. So monitoring basically is paying attention on a regular basis, right? We talked about how do we measure and the frequency by which we measure, right? That's important because it's also going into how frequently you're monitoring that. So how frequently are you paying attention to it? Okay. The second piece of monitoring, just think about, what are we comparing it to? So we talked a little bit about the measurement side of it previously. And now on the monitor side, you're kind of looking at it and are like, okay, you've got data. Now what? What do you do with that data? Well, can you compare it against benchmarks and targets or trends, right? Do you have any trends? So all of those go into monitoring, because think of monitoring as that dashboard where you're somehow drawing conclusions, right? You're putting that data up there for all to see. So what? So what? If you're just pulling data by itself, you can't really do anything with it. But data compared against benchmarks or compared against your internal targets, say a budget or a forecast or best in class or industry averages, industry standards, that really will tell a story. That will gain attention. That will show you There again, it will show you if it's a good number or if it's a bad number, right? We can start drawing conclusions from that. Do you see any trends? Trends mean that your benchmarks are really just the data stacked up against each one another, right? So say if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday performance, right? Say shipments. So on Monday we shipped 25. On Tuesday we shipped 125. Wednesday we shipped 150. So 3 is a trend. 2 you can't really tell. 3 you can start trending, 3 or more. Then you say, "Oh, geez, what happened to Monday?" Oh, well, there was a piece of equipment down, or we had issues. We had weather issues, right? We had power outage, or whatever it was, right? But there was something that interrupted your progress. Your progress. You can see that in trends, right? And trends are, you can do it for sales, you can do it for shipments, you can do it, over weeks. It doesn't have to be just days. You can do it over hours, right? So if maybe you have hourly production targets, or if you're in retail, hourly sales targets, right? Are you getting the traffic into the store that is going to allow you to sell at a certain rate? Or say you have a call center. Are you getting the calls in that you normally get in? You're benchmarking versus maybe a year ago, the same day. So say it's a seasonal business and you do a whole lot for Christmas time, the holidays. Or maybe it's a seasonal business in the summer and you should be getting all kinds of calls for whatever your service business is, because maybe it's a pool service business, right? And you need to get more traction, right? Because your numbers are telling you that against your benchmark or against prior year, you're not getting as many calls as you got last year, this same time. What's causing that? What's causing that? So we go back, remember, we go back and measure, and now we're monitoring. We are pulling that data together in a format that makes sense. Now, dashboards are great, but are there other formats that are going to tell you a little bit more about what's going on in your business? Maybe you have to do, I call it the data vomit, right? We hate to do that, but maybe you need some more information on that. You need to go back and get some more data because you're not getting the full story based on the data, the 5 points of data, or the 5 different data sets that you're collecting now and looking at. And if that's the case, you want to, deep dive into the numbers, then you're going to have to start asking some questions. You're going to have to ask some questions about, maybe we need a little bit more information. Maybe we need data that is complementary to that supports that. Maybe it's not a drill down of that particular data, but maybe it's relevant data that maybe leads to that phone call, maybe leads to, the seasonality or lack thereof, right? That leads to the demand that we're not seeing in the business, that leads to the foot traffic, right? If we start looking at things like weather, some businesses are weather dependent. We talked about cyclicality, right? Seasonality. Well, what about weather dependence, right? What if if you're doing, anything related to pools, right? Swimming pools. You, people want pools when it's warm out or hot out, right? They aren't necessarily thinking about pools in wintertime or when it's cold outside. that's going to drive demand. So if you get an early spring, right? Spring weather earlier, people then start thinking about it, right? They're not thinking about snow shovels and they're not thinking about winter things anymore. They are more focused on, especially that first day, that first nice day. Ooh, I'm thinking about, summer, right? Or you're thinking about, oh, I need to get my lawnmower repaired, or I need to sign up for lawn service. All of those go into what that monitoring looks like and the associated data that can help give you some more background on the story behind that number, right? So, bottom line, what gets measured gets managed, and it gets managed through the monitoring process. So we have our measure and then we're monitoring. And monitoring leads us to paying attention on a regular basis to our data so that we can start to see the story behind the numbers. So we're going to take a short 2-minute break right now. And when we return, we'll be talking about It's a Cycle, Analyze. Be sure to check out my collection of free resources at turboexecs.com/turbocharge. And you can continue the conversation with me, Patty Lawrence, on LinkedIn. You've been listening to Turbocharge Your Business in episode 50. It's a Cycle. Monitor on IBGR. I'm Patty Lawrence, and we'll be back after a short break.